Hello, hello, hello. Hi, guys, and welcome to another episode of Bent Pages and Bending Bodies. I'm your hostess, Dr. Hannah P. And before we get into today's episode, please go like, subscribe, follow this page on Instagram at BPBB Podcast, like Bent Pages, Bending Bodies Podcast. Yep, you got it. BPBB podcast. You can also find this episode on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. The video will be available on YouTube. And yeah, without further ado, let's get into this episode. Guys, I'm so excited. So last week I told you that today's episode is going to be very, very exciting. And it is because I have my first guest on the show, and I'm super excited that she agreed. So without further ado, guys, this is Katie Witts. OTRL. So she is an occupational therapist. Katie is from the Midwest because, guys, we do not share a geographic location, HIPAA laws, all that kind of stuff. We're trying to keep things private. Okay. So she was born and raised in her state in the Midwest. She graduated from OT school in 2020. She started working in 2021 as an outpatient neuro occupational therapist. She stayed there for about 2 years and then transferred over to her current job. Also, guys, Katie and I are coworkers, so that's how we met each other. So she's at her current facility, which is my facility as well. But she started that in January of 2023. So, yeah, hello, Katie. How are you?
Hello, great. Thanks for having me.
No problem at all. How are you feeling right now? How are you feeling?
Good. Feeling great.
Good, good, good. All right. Well, let's jump into our questions. So first of all, for our listeners, I have been mostly talking about physical therapy on this platform. So can you just kind of tell us what is occupational therapy? How does it differ from physical therapy?
Yeah, so occupational therapy, we are a biomedical profession that uses both the medical and the social model for recovery. Our scope of practice focuses on what we call occupations, which are those meaningful activities that you do in your like day-to-day life. So, for example, that could be as simple as getting yourself dressed, cooking a meal, driving your car, walking your dog, anything that you do in a day, that is what our occupations are. As occupational therapists, we don't use occupations to heal people, but more so like working within the domains of an occupation. So we're using activity analysis of the body, context, and conditions to kind of pinpoint those areas of dysfunction. And then we use occupation as our like overall intervention to facilitate healing and promote independence in those things.
Cool, cool, cool. So I guess and like how does that differ from PT? Because I'll say I think we use similar models in the sense of, I kind of help heal people through if they tell me, I used to walk a lot in my job, obviously we're going to focus on walking, or if their job requires, climbing ladders, like, I would help them do that as well. So how does occupational therapy typically differ from physical therapy?
Yeah, OT and PT, I feel like we are like very interconnected. You and I go together a
Right.
lot. We collaborate for
Collab, yep.
but I think like the main difference is really like our scope, like our lens, right?
Mhm.
A lot of the times like you and I could probably do a lot of the same interventions, right? But the reason I'm doing it is probably in a way different than the reason like why you're doing it through your scope of practice, right? Like through your lens.
Yeah,
So that's usually like the main difference.
yeah. Sorry, my cat is getting fed right now. I don't know if you just heard that in the background. But yeah, I think a really good example of that would be for like post concussion, right? So as a physical therapist, I work with post concussion. As an OT, you work with post concussion, right? And so for our listeners, a big thing with concussion syndrome is people get dizzy a lot, right? That's just like a common symptom that we hear. And so um, I can do eye exercises, and that's a completely different reason for why Katie is doing eye exercises. And so, yeah, I think that's just like a little bit of an example how our lenses are a little bit different in that sense of treating the same thing, but in a
Yeah.
different way, I guess to say.
I like
um,
to complement each other very nicely.
yeah, I agree. do you feel like it's hard for, or do you, I don't know, let me try to rephrase this. How do you think that PT and OT kind of overlap? And if so, how do we differentiate it in the terms of we're not billing the same or, um, doing the same interventions for our patients?
That's a really good question. Um, I think we do overlap quite a bit. I think it is about all about like how you like why are you doing what you're doing, right? For OTs, that's kind of I feel like almost drilled into us. Like why like why are we doing what we're doing? Why is this meaningful? Why is this, how are you breaking this task down to build it back up again? Um,
Okay, so on to the next question then. So what initially drew you to the field of occupational therapy?
I always knew I wanted to go into healthcare early on. I'm gonna throw out that cliche answer of I just always wanted to help people. I feel like a lot of people in healthcare, they really do want to make a difference. They want to help people. Um, I didn't know what occupational therapy was until I was in college. I was actually shadowing a physical therapist at a outpatient clinic in my town that I was going to college in. Um, and I got to like explore, speech, OT, and kind of like see what they do. So I followed an occupational therapist around for a little bit and kind of sparked that interest. So I kind of dove into it a little bit more, kind of like looking to see, what's the difference? What do they do? And I think the profession of OT just like it felt like it aligned with me and my goals and my personality. So I kind of just went that route of I kind of always wanted was like rehab, yes.
Yeah, nice, nice, nice. And
Yeah.
then, so you used to, it sounds like, you went from one neuro facility to the next neuro. What drew you specifically to neuro?
I absolutely love neuro. I think I just love it that no two patients are ever the same.
Yeah.
You have the exact same diagnosis and it just
Completely
presents
different presentation.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it's always like I get to be so creative and I get to problem solve and you just don't come up with all these things to try to help someone and it's always new. It's always exciting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. I totally agree. I love neuro.
Yeah.
Awesome. So what are some areas that OTs can be found? So we talked about kind of this neurologic rehab setting, which is you did that outpatient and now you're at this, we'll talk about your current job. I kind of
Yeah.
talked about what I do, but just what are some other, instead of like just neuro, but what are some other fields or areas that we can find some OTs?
Yeah. OT, I feel like it's such a versatile field. It's just so nice because it's like if you get bored or you're not really like feeling one area, there's so many other areas that you can kind of
Okay.
jump into and learn more about.
Yeah.
Um, OTs can be found in the mental health field. You can work in pediatrics, whether that's like a school or like a medical setting. OTs do some driver's rehab sometimes. You can be found in a hospital doing like inpatient, ICU, acute care, aquatic therapy,
Yeah, there's
neuro,
more.
and so many. I feel like I almost listed all of them. There's probably more out there.
Yeah, there's probably more, but yeah, those are the big ones that I can think of. Let's talk a little bit more about driver's rehab because I feel like that's kind of cool. And also to me, a little scary, right? I'm thinking like I know the patients that I work with, and for the listeners, if you don't remember, Katie and I work in a setting when we talk about neurologic conditions. We are talking about individuals with brain injuries who have strokes, spinal cord injuries, it can be multiple sclerosis, Guillain-Barré. I mean, the list goes Parkinson's, the list goes on. It's our nervous system. And when neurologic complications happen, they affect different things. They affect like the speed of, your reaction time. But also, like I said, we work with brain injury and stroke. Okay. And so I'm like, I do not feel comfortable getting in a car. No offense to anybody, but if I know you have a brain injury, I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. So can you talk a little bit about what is driver's rehab like? Kind of you just first get on the road and you're just taking off and going, or is there kind of like a build up to getting on the road? How does that work?
Oh my gosh, yes, absolutely a build up. Get back on the road.
I'm like, girl, I'm not getting in a car with you with them. No offense.
not be the first one to sign up to get in a car with someone after a
Oh,
logical. I'm good.
yeah.
Yeah, I do a lot of our pre-driving stuff at our facility. And pre-driving kind of consists of kind of remediating and like relearning all of those skills that you need in order to drive. And so you kind of mentioned like reaction time. It could be vision, visual scanning stuff, just processing speeds. Um, a lot of the times, like we have a virtual driver at our work on this machine that simulates driving, a lot
Oh,
more
cool.
comfortable.
Yeah.
Um, it gives you a really good gauge on, how would they do on the road before they actually get in a car.
Yeah.
Sometimes getting them familiar with the car again. Even doing passenger assisted drives where I'm driving the car and they have to tell me, hey, you're gonna stop up here, turn your turn signal on, doing those head turns and saying, get in the other lane. I'm much more comfortable with that
I
initially before.
love the virtual. That sounds great. I mean, because I'm just thinking, you and I, we share patients, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, we have an individual, what we call is neglect, guys. So if you have neglect, you can see out of a certain side of you, right? Like you can see that area, but you just don't physically pay attention, right? So someone with, left neglect, let's just say that's the most common, they will fail to acknowledge the left side of their world, right? So they forget about their upper and lower left extremity. They don't look to the left at all. They will run into things on the left. They won't shave on the left. They won't dress their body on the left. All their food is on the right side. And they just, I mean,
Really
it's
wild.
really incredible, honestly, to see true neglect. And so yeah, I'm thinking in a car, do you see, you can see the true neglect, right?
Especially like with a left neglect, like all of a sudden their car is like splitting the lane, and you're like, hey, do you know your car's not in the middle of like your lane? They're like, no, I'm good. Like they first believe that they are driving perfectly on their side of the road. And then all of a sudden, simulation will have like a head on collision. They're like,
Oh,
why'd the computer send at me?
it's not the
It's
computer.
no like recognition at all that
Yeah.
their car was not where it needed to be.
It's so
It's
interesting to see,
so,
but thank goodness
uh,
for virtual driving.
yes.
Yes.
Certified in on-road driving. I do refer out for that at our facility. So I
Okay.
work closely with another provider. And he is much braver than I. He actually like does the on-roads, gets them in the car. Yeah.
So I don't know if you would know this. Is it, so I remember like back in driver school when I was 16, okay, like years ago, but in the driver car or whatever, like the student driver had their, like they had access to the brake and the gas. And then like the instructor, I think also had access to a brake. Do you know if the car is set up like that for the actual on-roading, or I don't know, is it just a
I,
regular vehicle or?
yeah, I think it's like a driver's ed type vehicle.
Okay, so they can kind of control if things are getting out of control.
Yeah.
Okay. That's good. That's good to know. Yeah. And also just for our listeners, typically I'll say I haven't ran into a case thus far, so I'll say typically, but for the most part, when you do go through an intensive injury like this, so a brain injury, a stroke, spinal cord injury, the state will take away your license. So just so that way everybody feels safe, these individuals, they are notified by the state that they are not allowed to drive until they go through this comprehensive program. So that's just kind of like a little tidbit because if I was listening, I'd be like, how many people are out here driving with brain injuries? But if someone has had a stroke or brain injury, they have to go through this process, right, to get their license back. Yeah.
Yeah. Really. And then even from there, it can totally be a restricted license. So we can make recommendations and being like only daytime driving, only driving within like 5 miles of your house, even. Like it can
Okay.
be
Yeah.
super it could be a full license. Like it's all just patient dependent.
That's
But
really cool to know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Makes me feel a little bit better being on the road. No offense. All right, awesome. So I guess can you just kind of describe what is a typical, let's just go with your day-to-day at your current facility. Well, first, this, sorry, this is a little bit out of order. So we kind of talked about our facility. Again, for the listeners, can you just kind of tell, is it considered inpatient, outpatient? We said it's neuro, but I guess what is this like setting like?
How have you described it before? Because I describe our transitional.
Yeah,
Um, our
I just said it
facility
was like a mix of everything.
really is. It's kind of hard to describe.
It
We kind
is.
of transitional mixed with an outpatient, and then like even some, I would almost call it like home care.
Yeah,
Technically,
like
like
home care nurse, like not nurse, but like long-term acute care type. Um,
yeah, kind of best of both worlds, a little bit of
yeah,
everything.
it's everything. And while we do mostly see neurologic patients, like every once in a while we get those ortho people, and I'm like, oh, I don't like ortho at all.
It
um,
throws me for a loop because I get in this like neuro way for a while, and they'll be like ortho case.
I'm like, wait,
I'm
what?
like,
You want me to check out a knee, a back? I don't know back exercise. I have to like go to my school notes real quick. Like, what do you do for a back pain? I was like, I haven't
straight
treated a back.
shoulder. Oh yeah, here we go.
Yeah. I'm like, okay. No, that's so funny. So yeah, so I guess at our facility, what's your day-to-day like?
Ooh, I feel like a lot of the times it's always changing, but I guess a typical day would be probably the first few hours of my day are spent doing a lot of BADLs. So that is kind of those AM routines, showering, dressing, um, toileting, grooming, helping people get up, get ready for their day, getting ready for therapy, kind of working on those skills to promote independence so that they can eventually put their clothes on and shower from themselves. Being in the room really gives me a very good idea of what exactly they're struggling with for those types of like components and like breaking the tasks down. Um, Midday to afternoon, it's mostly all clinic sessions. I feel very fortunate with our facility. OT for me is like I could be in the gym, I could be cooking with a patient in our kitchen, out in the community, actually, like going like grocery shopping, seeing how they do outside there, going to our AFC homes and seeing some more like long-term patients that we have. The possibilities of my day are endless.
Yeah.
It's always something new,
It's
but
very,
I
I
like,
think it's so cool. Let's so guys, for those of you who don't know, she mentioned BADLs, which means basic activities of daily living. So that's like you're showering, that's you're getting dressed, brushing your teeth, all those kinds of things, right? So I guess I've always wanted to know what is it like? This is weird, but what is it like to get in the shower with a patient? Like, I'll just say for listeners, as a PT, listen, guys, I don't have to worry about that mess. If it's like I very, very rarely, if it can be helped, I do not have to take this person to the bathroom, right? If it can be helped, I don't have to get you dressed, but that's what you guys do, right? You guys have these AM routine, these morning routines that take, I think it takes forever, but you guys are like with
oh
them
no,
hour and a half, getting them ready for the morning. So like what was that like the first time you had to like shower with a patient? And I guess what is it? Just walk us through it because I've always wanted to know. Honestly, I was always been curious about that.
so I'm gonna start with this. Grad school did not prepare me enough about how much time I spend in the bathroom with patients.
Man, oh man.
100% agree with people. If there are PTs or OTs or people thinking about going into rehab, I don't want this to like deter them from going into OT, but it's a lot more time than I would have thought.
Hello.
Like a good 2 hours of my day,
Yeah.
probably. Not like strictly in the
You,
bath, but
I mean, are you, and you're in your current, like your work clothes, right? You're not like in like a swimsuit. I mean, or like just something that gets
oh my god,
wet. Like, I don't know. I don't even know what it would look like, honestly.
So I have designated rain boots for shower days
Okay.
because you don't wear your shoes if sometimes you can get away with it. Certain patients,
Yeah.
they don't spray water everywhere. Some of our showers kind of just like the flooring and stuff. Yeah, anyway. So I have rain boots,
Yeah.
protect my stuff like that. I always have I have a spare set of clothes in the car.
Okay.
Um, and that's a good rule for anyone working rehab,
Yeah.
let's be real.
Yeah. Yeah. Honestly, I need to start doing that because I get so sweaty at work. But anyway.
Right. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
like think about your first time showering with a patient. Like, what did you feel? What was like, where is it? Was it awkward? Like, just what did you feel?
I feel like I'm not like one to get very awkward. So I'm
Okay.
just like, all right, like I'm coming in there. It's like strictly business here. It's
Yeah.
like, hey, this is what we're doing today. We're gonna go shower, then we're gonna get dressed, and then you're gonna go off to therapy, and it's gonna be fine.
Yeah. And you work
You know,
with, all genders, right? Male, female,
yep,
non-binary, whatever. Yeah.
yep. And then if like someone does have like a preference, we do try to like accommodate for that. I've had a guy who was like, I'm definitely not showering in front of you. You're a female. Um, and I get that though. Like it's a very intimate
It
part
is.
of your like routine, right? Like to be so vulnerable and in front of someone. There's a lot of trust that goes into that. I feel like that almost gives me like a better connection with
Yeah.
my people because they're like, oh yeah, this is the girl who's like in my room in the morning. Like,
All right. Who see me in all
yeah,
my glory.
I feel like some of those patients though, it's like we just have like the best jokes and the best communication though too.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
awesome. So, like at our current facility, we don't have any male OTs. So, would that be a situation that, if a male was like, I am not showering with you, would you just have to like provide supervision and walk staff through it? Or I guess how would that work?
that's exactly what we do. So we do have
Okay.
male like residential staff,
Hmm.
and um, cut that out.
Yep.
Um, male residential staff that he will often come help me out if that's the case. And I will kind of like crack the door just so that I can provide some instruction on what to do,
Mhm.
how to cue, how to facilitate some things, depending on the case.
Yeah.
So that's usually works since we don't have any male OTs.
Right. Girl, I remember as a student, like I think this was my first clinical rotation. And this was my first day on the job, right? So guys, we're gonna have an episode about PT school and hopefully OT school later. Um, but yeah, so when you go through the process of PT OT school, you go through like the didactics and then you do your internships or like you actually go do your field work, right? So my first day of field work was in an inpatient hospital. And this is like the first lady of the day. We get in there and we're like, hey, we're from physical therapy. And she just like opens her covers and she's butt ass naked. And I was like, oh, okay, okay. Well then, so I just personally am glad that it's not a part of my job all the time to see people naked. But
And I feel like it's like once you've been,
yeah.
it doesn't matter. You've seen it all, and I like to tell people that too. I'm like, don't worry, we've seen it all. Nothing phases me. Like it's fine.
Yeah, no. That's so funny though. Yeah, I just have been always wondering about like what a morning routine is like. Because that's right. It just sounds so intimate. I guess so. Since we kind of also talked about, a person with neglect, again, that's a person who fails to attend to one side of their body. They don't, acknowledge looking at that side. They don't bathe that side. How would you help somebody who has neglect, with their morning routine in general? Let's just go
That's
back to the example of like left-sided neglect. Like, what are some cues you would give, or how would you just help them through their morning routine?
So if you're using what we call like those compensatory strategies, so just trying to promote the most independence with that neglect, right? Um, Providing all of their stuff on their right side, putting things with I cannot think of the word, like visual markers, like brightly colored things, sometimes to help just catch their eye, to look towards some stuff. Really just setting up their environment so that they can be the most independent and like actually just navigate it how they would.
Mhm.
Um, if you're trying to kind of facilitate more visual scanning or just some attention to that left side within like the clinic or even in our morning routines and stuff, you can promote like the light housing.
I love that strategy. Talk about it. Talk about it. Yeah.
Yeah, so where you're like cueing them to like literally be a lighthouse, right? Like you are like moving your head all the way across to see the entire field of like your equipment. That one is probably my favorite one.
I use
Um,
that cue a lot too. So I love that you said that.
uh,
I haven't said that on here, but that's just a personal cue. Like I think of yourself like a lighthouse and just, right, scanning the whole water. Um,
yeah,
yeah.
because sometimes they'll even be like, I didn't even know that was there, and it is like right
Right
here
in
and
their face. It is baffling.
so
Like,
crazy.
it
It's
is
just
like, guys, neglect is one of the most interesting, to me personally, it is one
yeah,
of the most interesting neurologic impairments. It is a processing disorder. So these individuals they can see out of that side, like I said, they're just not aware. They just don't attend, they don't pay attention to that side of the world. And so I have had a patient where like literally he literally sat like this the whole time looking over like his right shoulder. And I would say like, okay, come find me, like come find my face. He would literally just like he would move his head, but his eyes would stay to the right. And I'm like, bring your eyes and your head with you. And like when I would be sitting right in front of his face and he'd be like, oh, and you can just see like the light go off like, oh, I did not know you were there or that thing was there. And it's just like, I am right in front of you, like
yeah.
right smack in front of you. um oh,
I've
it's
had
so interesting.
too where it's like I will purposely sometimes play if they have like more like inattention than neglect, like I'll purposely place things on their left side to
Yeah.
promote them having to look. And I had a patient who literally watched me put all the stuff, all his body wash, washcloth on that side. He's sitting in the shower. He's like, where's my stuff?
You just watch me put it over there. What?
To the left there. He like turns, he goes, oh,
Yeah,
there.
there. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
there it is. Yep, you're
yep,
right, sir, it is. It's so
yep,
interesting.
repetition. But even sometimes then, because it is a processing thing, that neglect or inattention just kind of stays. And that's
Yeah.
when we have those compensatory strategies there.
Hello. Yeah, and for listeners, um, what I guess is there much of a difference between inattention and true neglect? Because we kind of like threw that out there, but I guess what would you say the biggest difference is, if there is any?
Yeah, neglect can come in the form. Mm, yeah.
I know I was asking it and I was like, what is the difference? I guess to me, I feel like inattention is more like the individual will still sometimes use that side, still sometimes scan to that side, but I feel like true neglect is like they have no awareness of that side. And so like in terms of a PT standpoint, I'm sure you see this in OT too, we also see what's called functional neglect. And so they fail to use that extremity. Like they have full access to it. They can use their
Oh,
leg, right? They
they
can use their
right.
arm,
Oh,
but they forget it. Like I've had individuals, I tell them to roll over in bed and they leave their whole arm behind them and twist it. And I'm like, bro, where is your arm at? And they're like, my right arm's right here. I'm like, okay, where's your other arm? My right arm's right here. I'm like, your other arm. And they don't understand that they have a left arm. It's so interesting to me.
yeah. I feel like inattention is like they can attend to that side.
Mhm.
They often forget it. I think they have like that preferred sides, like with left inattention with our guy who kind of sits this way,
Yeah.
focus to the right,
Uh-huh.
even like people like they turn this way. But sometimes he can fully attend to that left side.
It's
It's
really interesting.
intermittent.
Yeah.
Neglect, I think, comes from like a field cut, oftentimes, where it's like that visual field cut, and then the connection to the brain is just there's nothing there.
Yeah.
The side is no longer a part of us. We are only focusing on what we are seeing out.
It's so interesting. So I guess, so mentioned a field cut. So for individuals with neglect, do they have a true field cut? Like when you do their visual scanning, or I guess, oh, let's talk about this. Sorry, I just kind of jumped into the next question. But okay, so how would you test for neglect? You guys have a couple different like assessments that you do, like the word. I'll let you talk about it. What do you guys do for neglect?
Oh, so I just do this for an overall screen for every single person that comes in, actually. Just like a visual scanning. I do line cancellation stuff.
Mm,
Um, and we do a circles, like, I don't know the real name of it, I'll be honest right now off the top of my head.
okay.
But there's just like blank circles on a page. There's either 20 of them or 40 of them. And I'm like, hey, can you just number the circles in order?
Mm.
Simple directions, right?
How would a
Um,
typical person, a person who does not have any type of injury, how would a typical person number the circles?
Usually someone will start on that left side and kind of go all the way across left to right,
Mm,
so circling back, kind of weaving back and forth, and then they'll get all of the circles. So if it's 1 through 20, they've got 1 through 20. Every single number is accounted for. It's like a nice scanning pattern. Um, I've seen it before where I give this, and someone with neglect or even just like inattention, sometimes it'll be clear down the middle that it is 1 through however many circles they see,
mhm.
and they'll be like, there wasn't 20 circles.
I
I got
promise there are.
I got 13. And you're like, there's 20 on the page.
Right.
But it's nice with numbering because then you can also see exactly where their eyes are jumping to next,
Yeah.
right? Same with that line cancellation. Sometimes you'll get that clear cut right down the middle of the page where it's like it's only on the right side or only on the left side. And you're like,
Yeah.
okay, we have
We got some
some
work to
visual evidence there.
do.
We have some work to do.
What are some interventions or pieces of equipment that you use to help out with visual scanning?
Say it one more time. I'm so sorry.
No, you're fine. What are some like interventions or what is that, pieces of equipment that you use to help out with visual scanning? So we talked about like the lighthouse strategy, but you guys also have that like board and like you guys have other interventions that you do.
Yeah. So our most like basic one, if we're not going technology based, it's as simple as having like a piece of paper and just going like line by line so people can read straight across, or using a highlighter to highlight like the border of the page to be like, okay, you're looking all the way across until you see the color yellow or pink or whatever color you choose, right? Like that's a really good indicator to know, hey, I made it all the way across on this line. Now I can start over again. um, those are just some really simple and easy ways to kind of promote that. Yeah, we do have the bits board at our work, which is a wonderful tool that we get to use. Um,
What is
that
the
we Sorry, what?
Sorry, what is the bits board for people? I know what it is, but just for people who don't.
Do you want the actual name of it? I don't.
Um, you don't have to do the name, but just kind of like what does it look like, or what is the
Premise of it.
yeah.
So our bits board it's like a giant touchscreen TV.
Okay.
Uh, really nice. It's adjustable. You can put it up and down. You can kind of like tilt it if you really want to. I never do. Um, but it has a lot of different functions, different activities on there, a lot that just promote visual scanning, a lot of cognitive skills, processing stuff. But you can even set the board to only display like one I use really commonly is just like these little circles. They pop up on the screen and you got to touch them, and then another one will pop up and you got to tap it. So it even does like reaction time, but you can set it so it's like only on the left side 100% of the time, or like 50% of the time, or yeah, you can do different quadrants and
Awesome. Yeah.
yeah.
And I feel like, that, so I feel like all of our interventions and technology can be used for multiple like scopes, right? So we were talking about neglect, right? But I think that also for an individual who doesn't have, good functional use of their hand, right? Like that also sounds like something that they could do. Is that the case? Or do you only use it for like a certain diagnosis, or how does that work?
No, we use the bits for it for like many things. A lot of like our CDAs, people who have strokes, a lot of the times we'll use it with them too if they have functional movement, just to kind of promote functional reaching, kind of some cognitive skills, dual tasking. Um, Used a lot with like post concussion, any type of like visual or vision issues. I kind of use that with. Really, the possibilities are endless.
Yeah.
Um, they have so many different activities on there too. It just is like kind of nice. Sometimes it's like if you get stuck in a rut with doing, you know, tabletop activities or things in the gym, it's kind of sometimes nice for people to like interact with electronics,
Yeah.
kind of something that kind of gives them something to break up their therapy sessions with sometimes too.
Gotcha. Gotcha. All right, well, let's go into some, we've been talking a lot about, specific conditions. Let's kind of go into some other topics. So here's a little question. So like, let's say a listener is having trouble with reading a book, right? Due to some limited hand mobility or some hand pain, whatever. What can an occupational therapist do to help them continue reading? I also like this question because this podcast is Bent Pages Bending Bodies. We do book reviews as well. So for our listeners who can't pick up their books and read, what are some strategies? What can they do to kind of help out with that?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's. Ooh,
I know I just put you on
I
the
don't know
spot.
what I found that. Okay, so there's some different things on the market that you can get. Things as simple as just like a book holder.
Oh,
Um, you know, you don't always have to hold your book with your hand. I know that's like probably everyone's preferred way, right?
right.
Uh, but if
Well,
that's
most people are like listen nowadays, but let's say we have the person who still likes the traditional way of reading.
yeah, they have things you can get on Amazon that will like help hold your book open that you can do, and then it's just like turning the page. Um, but yeah, I was gonna say audiobooks are great too if you
Yeah.
want to go down that route. That's always
Nice, nice. I guess for somebody who came in though, talking like to your clinic, right? And they were like, oh, my wrist has been hurting. That's like an ortho thing actually. So
I
we're
was
not
that's
let's,
so many different things, honestly.
yeah, it's hard. It's hard to just kind of give just like generic advice. It is hard. Okay.
I would
Um,
say are having hand pain from holding your book, please go see your physician
yeah.
and get a referral if you need OT, for a hand therapist, preferably, because it could be a variety of things.
Yeah, yeah, it could be like tightness. It could be, I don't know. I don't know what the case could be, but
Further testing.
yeah. Further testing, exactly. So also that's a great, hold on, guys. For people who have friends who are occupational therapists, physical therapists, you can't just go up to us and just be like, oh, I have this crick in my neck, what should I do for it? Like I love helping people. Do not get me wrong. But that's one of the hardest questions of all time. Like, oh, I have this thing going on with me. What should I do for it? Because it's like
Every holiday, every holiday, I have
whenever I go home, and
a
I
problem.
shout out to my family. This is no beef with y'all, no beef with my family or friends. But it's just like I would literally need to do so much more. I don't want to give you generic advice. You know what I mean? If you want generic advice, like go Google it. No offense, but like I would need to like see you, evaluate you, like get my hand, like it's called physical therapy for me for a certain reason. Like I often, like at the point of my career, I'm not at that point where I can just kind of hear what's going on, like, oh, yep, do this, right? Or to ask these, like, no, I need to feel it. I need to do my little special test and then I can give you a little bit more. But yeah, just having oh, I can't read my book because my hand hurts. You're like,
Here's my best generic advice. Please go see your physician or a therapist.
you're so right, girl. You're so right. So I apologize for that question.
Uh,
I read, I was like, you know what? That is a little bit of a generic question. My bad.
you're good. Yeah, no, sometimes it's like, we need imaging for that. I don't have
Right.
X-ray vision. Like,
Yeah.
I wish I did. I would be so much more helpful.
So I guess I don't know if this is generic or not. This is a little bit more specific, right? So we're talking about like hand coordination activities. How could somebody improve with hand coordination? Let's say, this individual, we'll go back because we are working in the neurologic rehab field. So this is an individual who had a stroke, right? And for whatever reason, they're having incoordination of their upper extremity. What are some activities that they can do to kind of help promote functional use of that hand and some more coordination?
Repetition, 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 high repetition, high intensity. Start easy, quote unquote easy, right? Um, Easy things are usually larger, just practice, right? Mass practice of picking things up, putting it somewhere else, repetitive, right? Make it harder by adding resistance, make it harder by making it smaller. Make it harder by having like an actual like target that you have to put it in, or that you're having to hold on to it longer and reaching for something, or reaching down low, crossing midline, any of these things that to someone who's fully functioning and hasn't had an injury, right? Those things seem very easy,
Mhm.
right? But for someone who's had a neurological issue or event, um, these things are actually very difficult. So
Yeah,
starting easy and progressing your way up.
yeah.
Um,
My mom, she actually, before I went to physical therapy school, she had a major car accident. It was awful. I don't want to like tell all her business, so I'll just kind of tell you about the uppers. I'll get her permission later. I'm sure she doesn't mind me sharing, but I don't think she'll mind me sharing this part. So for upper extremities, both of her arms were affected. No, she didn't have like a neurologic impairment, but it was more like kind of that orthopedic route. So working on strengthening, working on, precision and dexterity. And so, yeah, her OT was like, okay, I want you to take these blocks and just put them over there. And I remember my mom, she was like, Hannah, I was like, okay, and then she did it. She was like, oh, she's like, that was hard, So do you get that response from people like, oh, you just want me to put the boxes, put the square somewhere? And then I guess how do people respond when you kind of give them what we think as of these more easier, less challenging tasks, and then they find out like, oh, this is not as easy as I thought? How does that conversation go?
oh yeah, I had this one guy. He just comes to my mind immediately. There was one time I like brought out some sort of activity, right? It was like fine motor coordination focused. And he's just like, what is this, kindergarten? And it's like, at that point, I'm like, I'm sorry if I offended you, but it's like, let's do this. Like, this is
Yeah.
difficult, right? And I try not to like make it so it's like little kiddish or anything like that, right? There's other tasks you can do that are fine motor coordination driven that are either more functional or more up their alley for leisure. Um, but yeah, sometimes people are like, this is gonna be easy, and then they get to it and they're like, oh wow, this
Oh.
is
I'm not gonna lie, sometimes when that happens, I'm like, mm-hmm,
yeah.
yep.
Mhm.
Like, because I don't know if you feel like this, as a young woman, I like, we're both young, okay? We're out here, we're young. Getting into our careers, I feel like sometimes our patients don't always trust us or trust our judgment with things, trust um our clinical reasoning, if you will. And so sometimes when people think things are going to be easy, I'm like, no, no, no. I try to give them that kind of like reality. Hey, like it might have been easy before your injury. But sometimes when they're like, oh, you were right. Something like, I know. I
And that's the
don't know if you
thing.
feel the same. I'm petty, but
So sometimes you're just like, I knew it.
yeah.
They kind of show it. You're just like, mm-hmm. Sometimes though, I'll admit, like, I was wrong where I'm like, oh, that was way too easy for you. And they're like, okay, so we're done. I was like, no, no, no.
Oh,
Love
no,
it.
no, no. It's time for harder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're like, just prove to me you could do it. So let's move on. We're gonna
Up the ante.
yep. And
Yeah.
that's the stuff about that though. It's just like as soon as they're progressing, it's like you're just like level up, level up,
Yep.
level up. Like keep it going.
Love it. Yes. So yeah, kind of we were talking about patient stories. Do you have like any favorite success stories that come to mind? Being in your field, outpatient or in this new transitional facility, any patient success stories that you're like, yes, I did that.
I think one of my favorite, I don't know if I would call this a success story. I think it was just like one of my favorite moments about being an occupational therapist was I had this patient. She's probably around the same age that we are, roughly. Um, and I was like, hey, we're gonna try going out in the community. We're gonna go grocery shopping for the first time. You know, we did all of our planning and prepping and we were getting ready and we got in the car and we're going to the store. And she tells me, she's like, this is the first time I've gone out in public since my medical event. And
Yeah.
right there, I just felt
It's
it
the
in
little
my
things.
heart. This is such an honor to be
Yeah.
sharing this moment with you. And, you know, I'm hoping that I'm doing everything that this is a great moment for her. She was really looking forward to it. And we just kind of talked about, you know, what that meant to her and how she was like, I'm so excited to be finally going back out in public and being able to start doing this kind of stuff again. And I was like, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. Like, this is meaningful. Like, this is exciting. And I like try not to cry.
I know. Like literally, I just feel like
Oh,
we get to help people go back to life, right? Like whatever life might look like on the other side of your injury, but we get to help people get back to their lives, and something that we able-bodied people without injury take for granted is like going to the store, just like going outside. I mean, running your errands, and for her to have like, I think that was such a big deal. Like, this is the first time, it's a huge deal. This is the first time I had the strength, I had the capacity to go back out there and kind of get back to my normal life after injury. And yeah, it's just a beautiful thing that you get to share that with her. Oh, I
yeah.
love that.
Yeah.
I
It,
definitely would claim that as a success story for sure. For sure. Um, so yeah, kind of just starting to wrap things up. I don't want to hold you too long. But what are some challenges that you face as an occupational therapist?
I feel like challenges that occupational therapists face. I feel like the name occupation, right? A lot of people are like,
What
I
does
don't
that mean?
have, and like, um, which I honestly sometimes I love that response, and I see it a lot from older adults who are like, I'm retired.
Yeah. I don't need you.
I do like that response because it gives me an opportunity to educate people on, you know, my scope of practice and why I'm here and what I can do for them. um I think a lot of the times there's just the misconceptions about like what OTs do. So
Yeah, what
having
are
to,
those misconceptions?
that's where I'm like, I don't know. I feel like lots of people just assume it's like, oh, we're only upper body, right?
Mm-hmm.
I really don't like when people are like, OTs are upper body, PTs are lower body. It like really breaks the patient in half. And it's like
Not.
whole body mix.
Yeah.
Everything kind of works together.
Yep.
So that's not really what we do. Any kind of thing like that, where they're just like, oh, It's just ADLs. Like they're only getting people dressed. It's like, no, we are
So much.
looking at things and then breaking it down. Task analysis, baby.
Yeah.
Um, my
Love that.
is like for any people who are out there, PTs, OTs, advocate for occupational therapy. Let people know what we do. Um,
Yeah,
show our
I feel like occupational therapists and PTs, we just lean on each other so hard. I have heard that so many times. We're like, oh, well, OTs mostly focus on the upper body, whereas PTs focus on the lower. I'm like, excuse me, I studied the whole body in school. Okay. I have to know
right,
all of the arm muscles, all of the brachial plexus, everything. Okay. So I'm not going to be limited to just to the lower. But like you said, it's about the entire person, right? So if you're getting somebody dressed, you're still dressing their legs. Hello. So what do you mean upper versus lower? Are they doing that in standing? Are they doing it edge of bed? Like that's still up to your analysis, right? That's still your domain. We talked about vision and how you and I both treat vision impairments, but in different ways. They're different scopes. And so, yeah, I think that's a great example of like, no, no, no. We are not limited in this field. OTs do not only do, the activities of daily lifestyle, like you guys do everything, right? It's a pretty large field when you get into it. And I think it's just really cool how in both of our fields, we can just always pivot. I have seen OTs who do wheelchair evaluations. So I actually at my previous facility that I worked at, it was an OT who assessed people for wheelchairs. And while a PT can do that, it was just really cool to see that like OTs, you guys can do that too. Yeah, you guys have a really great broad I'm losing my words right now, but I just think you guys encompass a lot of different areas. And yeah, we need to throw some more respect on it because you guys do not just bathe people, get people in the bathroom, whatever, and help them out in that way. You guys do a lot more than that. So definitely a lot of misconceptions for
yeah.
sure. Any advice for somebody trying to get into the OT field?
Ooh, shadow. Don't have the expectations, do your research on the field. Um, take every opportunity that you can to immerse yourself with like opportunities, shadowing PT, OT, getting in a medical facility if you can, volunteering. I feel like I did a lot of volunteer work in my undergrad with like different populations. I feel like that also helps you kind of figure out what road you really want to go down to.
Yeah, because we mentioned the morning routine and like showering, bathing with people, or that's showering, like going to the bathroom, getting people dressed. That's more seen like in our setting, right? Where it's like that transitional neurologic, but there are OTs who specifically just work on hand therapy and like you never have to shower somebody, you never have to see them in the bathroom.
No,
Um,
like making orthoses,
or those
like that's a really cool part of it. Like they're like these like intricate
hand
details.
splints and
Yeah, it's
yeah, so
there's more out there than just like inpatient transitional. I hope I didn't scare anyone away about
I
talking
don't
about the
think,
back a
yeah,
lot in
no,
this.
I don't think you did. And if they are, like, they'll just have to keep coming back to hear other OTs on here. But no, I think that we just mostly talked about our setting in the sense of, yeah, we deal with neurologic conditions. And so we're going to have a little bit more intensive or more personal relationships with these individuals. But like Katie said, go shadow, see what's going to be up your alley. Obviously, in OT school, you get to do your field work, you get to go through, different rotations and see what kind of calls to you more. But no, I don't think that I think we gave it candid, you know what I mean? I rather someone share it like it is so I know what I'm getting into versus like, oh, I did not know in my field I was gonna have to do this. So
Hang on.
yeah, I really hope the listeners appreciate your insight because I think it's been great. Like I said, I don't think you scare anybody away, but Yeah, so let's get into our, I guess, last question before I let you go. Just like looking at the future, what exciting developments do you feel like are happening in OT? This can be any type of development, whether it's policy, adaptive equipment, technology, just kind of what's out there for PT, how is, or not PT, haha, OT, and how is the field advancing?
I mean, technology is always advancing, right? Like right now we're in the age where like AI is becoming a thing, it's becoming way more common. Um, I'm suspecting that like we're going to be using much more technology, I think, in the future. As
Yeah,
to how it's going to be used, I'm really not sure.
yeah,
Um, I think I welcome all the advances that we have, you know. Um, I think there's definitely still always going to be a role for like human interaction
I think
for
so too.
or for PT. Um, it'll be interesting to see what the future brings with that though.
It will. So, like, guys, before we start recording this, Katie and I, we don't know enough about this to really talk about it, but we were talking about like the Neuralink with, I think it's, who is it? Elon Musk, I think, created that
Yeah,
Neuralink, which is basically like an implant that goes into your brain that basically helps like supercharge your nervous system and regain function. And so, we're not going to talk about the science behind it because I'll be honest, I don't know, but I think even with technology like this that helps individuals regain that motor function, we will still play an integral role, right? Like, personally, I just don't feel like a robot can do what we do. How does a robot know just enough? Okay, so in terms of PT, I'll do it in terms of my lens, right? So when it comes to balance, I have to be able to let the person lose their balance just enough, right? To the point where can I see if they can regain it or do they need my help? You know what I mean? There's a fine, the window is this big, guys. It's a very short window of letting somebody lose their balance, but not letting them fall, right? And so that's my PT example. I don't know an OT, but just kind of, that coordination that we're talking about. How can a robot really assess, the point where someone's able to do it, and then when a human needs to have like interact and kind of help them achieve their goal? I
yeah.
just, I don't know.
Like fine line of like when to facilitate this or not, and
It,
maybe one day technology will nail that correctly. But I don't know. I think we're a little bit a ways away.
I think so too, thankfully. Yeah, I hope so at least. Yeah, there's just a super fine line. And, there's actually some research in PT where when it comes to gait training and walking, we're actually supposed to let somebody fail 3 to 5 times before we step in, and so I guess, a robot recognizing error recognition. One, two, I don't know. I don't know enough about technology to see if it's going to work, but I currently feel pretty safe in my job. So that's what I'll say.
So one day.
Yeah. Dude. All right. Well, Katie, thank you so, so much for coming on here. Anything else you want to say to the listeners? This is putting you on the spot, but anything at all?
Yeah. Just I guess if you're gonna want to learn more about occupational therapy, check out the AOTA website, the American Occupational Therapy Association, or your state often will have information as well. Um, yeah, just
Yeah.
keep advocating for rehab in general.
Yes, because insurance is a bitch. But anyway, we're not going to talk about that's a whole another conversation for a whole another day. Well,
Yes.
guys, I hope that you have enjoyed this interview with Katie Witts. Like I said, she is an OT practicing in a neurologic rehab transitional type of style facility. I would love to have her back. We'll see if she wants to be back. Not putting her on spot. I'll probably cut that out. But guys, thank you so, so much for listening. And like I said, go check out this episode on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts. The episode video will be available on YouTube. This page is Bent Pages and Bending Bodies. So at BPBB Podcast. And yeah, I think that we're out. Bye.
Awesome. Bye. Thanks, Hannah.
Yeah, no problem.